let's get started. Hi, shalom everyone, and welcome to our Crossing Boundaries live stream. My name is Kim Passi Yosef. I'm streaming to you live from Tel Aviv, Israel, and together with me, as always, is one of our amazing co-founders, Aziz Abusera. Hi, Aziz.
Hello, and I'm
How are
really
you?
excited about this week conversation because the whole concept of what we're doing is bringing different narratives, trying to cross boundaries, trying to understand what's happening around us wherever we are in our own countries, our own cities, but also in other places around the world. And we learn so much about how little we know when we think of those countries. I, coming from Jerusalem, didn't know much about the areas we talking about today. Although I had Armenian friends growing up in Jerusalem because we have a large Armenian community there, but really didn't know even with having Armenian friends, didn't know about the Azerbaijan and Armenia conflict, which to me sounds crazy. It's like my best buddies in Jerusalem were literally Armenian, and yet we talked a lot about Turkey, but never really talked about Azerbaijan. So that was a surprise to me as I started learning about the conflict. And actually, I learned about the conflict later from an Azerbaijani friend who I met while working in George Mason University, who started explaining to me what's happening, and I was completely in shock. And not proud of it, but there's so much in this world that we don't know. And I think it's very unfortunate because if you're watching the news today, even though thousands of people are losing their lives in Armenia and Azerbaijan, it's not a priority item in the news. It's in the background if you search, if you really look, but if you go to foxnews.com or cnn.com, it's not the first or second or third even item on the sites. And this is something why we wanted to talk about it, because we think it's important to learn what's happening around the world and to hear the different voices of what's happening.
Right, I definitely agree, Aziz. I think that living or growing up in Israel, the number one spot that's written about, usually in the CNN and other news, it's strange that sometimes you don't want to be interested in other conflicts, because then, why are you not interested in your own home and in your own conflict? And actually, I'm happy for the opportunity to discuss this and learn more. And while I've been learning for this episode, it always brings me back to think about which side here is the Israeli or the Palestinian, and try to understand that not everything is about Israel and Palestine, and things are different around the world. So it's eye-opening for everyone. So welcome, Margarita and Olvi. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, and we are lucky to have both of you. You both are very knowledgeable about this. Margarita, you got your PhD from the place I worked at for many years, George Mason University, and Olvi, you've worked in international organizations and nonprofits, and worked on issues related to these conflicts and peace development and peace building. So it's really great to have both of you. What we're gonna do is we're gonna interview each of you separately, and we will start with Olvi. And while we're doing that, we'll move Margarita to the background, so she'll join the attendees. And Olvi, you watch this video right now, and maybe maybe before we want to watch a video. I'm sorry. We did a test a couple minutes earlier, Kim and I, but we want to, and the video kind of is a simplified explanation of the conflict. And then what we want to do is just talk to you about what do you think about this, and your thoughts about the history, pretty much, of what's happening. So let's start. It's just a 3.5 minutes of video, and then we will continue our conversation.
Mm-hmm. The first shots were fired in July before all-out war broke out at the end of September. It's been the worst fighting there in 25 years, but the grievances go back generations. At the heart of the dispute is a region called Nagorno-Karabakh. And here it is in a crowded neighborhood known as the South Caucasus. Nagorno-Karabakh lies entirely within Azerbaijan's borders. It's internationally recognized as being part of the country, full stop. Here's the thing, it's controlled by ethnic Armenians, backed by Armenia. And surrounding Nagorno-Karabakh are lands that Armenia controls. The UN calls it an occupation. Then you've got all the big neighbors, like Iran, which borders both. Turkey, it's long been an ally of Azerbaijan. And then there's Russia. It supplies weapons to both Armenia and Azerbaijan. We'll get into all the geopolitics later. But first, here's what Nagorno-Karabakh looks like. It makes up 5% of Azeri territory, but almost twice that much land around it is controlled by Armenian forces. About 150,000 people live here. It holds its own elections and governs itself. But right now, it's a war zone. Many people are living in their basements because of the shelling, and local officials say half the people who live there have been forced to leave. The thing about this region is that it's been fought over for a long time. Iran had control in the mid-18th century, then the Russians took over. The British and the Ottomans were in there too. But a key date in all of this is 1920. That's when Armenia and Azerbaijan went to war over Nagorno-Karabakh. And Azerbaijan, backed by Russia, got control. A year later, it was promised to the Armenians, but Stalin turned around and made sure Azerbaijan held onto it. By 1988, the Soviet Union was crumbling, and the Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh took advantage of the power vacuum and voted to join Armenia. So when the Soviet Union finally fell apart in 1991, so did whatever was left of peace in the South Caucasus.
What the collapse of the Soviet Union did was then to militarize this conflict. Both sides suddenly got much bigger weapons.
1992 was when the fighting really intensified, right after Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh declared independence. Both sides accuse each other of atrocities. Tens of thousands of local Azeris and Armenians were killed. 1 million people had to leave their homes. In the end, the Armenians pushed Azerbaijan's forces out of Nagorno-Karabakh, seized territories around it, and it all finally ended in a ceasefire in 1994. That ceasefire has been ignored by both Armenia and Azerbaijan over the years. And the sense of injustice over what happened in that war, the killings and mass displacement, hasn't gone away.
This conflict has always been kind of put on the back burner. There's always the danger of some terrible incident causing a new escalation, in which case things could get totally out of control, given the huge amount of weaponry we have on both sides.
And now, both sides are tapping into that anger. It's full-scale war all over again. Trenches, tanks, air attacks.
Air raid sirens wailed across the city as a barrage of rockets and mortars rained down.
Azeri forces have been attacking Nagorno-Karabakh's main city, Stepanakert. Armenian men there have been signing up to fight back. Exact numbers are next to impossible to come by, but soldiers and civilians on both sides have been killed. Armenian forces have been attacking Azerbaijan too. The border city of Ganja has been among the hardest hit.
The second rocket hits the other street, and there are also 2 other wounded people over there.
So how and why did the fighting start up again? The answer depends entirely on who you ask. Armenia says Azerbaijan attacked first. Azerbaijan says it acted in self-defense. What's clear is that it's not exactly an even fight. Our colleagues at AJ Labs put together these infographics to show just how much more Azerbaijan spends on its military, how many more soldiers it has, and how much more artillery.
Okay, hope that everyone heard that the video okay. I also sent a link on the chat if you're interested in watching this later. Olvi, let's start with any comments about the video, if there's anything that you'd like to correct or mention.
Well, thank you for inviting me. And again, because I'm historian also by my first training, I will definitely, for a lot of historical facts we're going to say, I would recommend two major resources. One is a book by Tom DeVal, Black Garden, which is called a Bible of this conflict. And the second one is it's a video product was just produced by Azerbaijani Armenian journalists through a British organization called Reconciliation Resources. And that's another good visual product. It's 1 hour video. You can Google it and you can find it. So basically, the current escalation, I can talk about historical background, which is true, which goes back 100 years, when we had our first republics. When we were living in the Tsarist Russia, we had no issues. I mean, for centuries before that, Armenians and Azeris lived in peace, no problems. But when we started to have our own republics, national republics, this is early 20th century thing, which comes from French Revolution time. So that's when things start to change, and people want to stay in their own republic and want to claim the territory. And in these territories, Armenians and Azeris lived, more or less equally. You may say more Azeris in each town, but there was significant Armenian population in all of those territories. At least when you look at modern Armenia and eastern or western part of Azerbaijan. So, they lived here in peace for centuries. So current escalation comes in, as I said, in July, when there were Armenian forces that moved their position a little bit ahead, and Azeri forces didn't know about this. They were driving in the car to their posts, military units, and they decided there was a shoot. They were shot, and then Azerbaijan, of course, responded by missiles and Armenian missiles. And the small escalation was in July, and it was the first time in, I think, since the ceasefire. I mean, even in the war, Azerbaijani general was killed. So that's angered people, a lot of people, and they went in the streets for the first time in many years. They have been in the streets before, but it was for when Turkey won in the World Championship, got in the third place, etc. But for fun stuff. But it was the first time people went in the streets in mass numbers to protest to this. And Azerbaijanis in general, I mean, we have 500,000 internally displaced people from these areas. And of course, we have about 200,000 refugees from Armenia from the 1988. So all these people, and of course others, for years have been, unhappy about how it ended for Azerbaijan. And of course, Azerbaijan, we can say, lost the battle in 1994 when ceasefire was signed. So people were unhappy about this, especially killing of several officers. And this officer, especially the senior officer, was to be a nice guy who was always kind with the soldiers, no problems with the soldiers, not corrupt, young person, and he's killed. So this, I think, was a turning point in Azeri society, which we see now, how they support president or the government in this war. I mean, I'm against this war, but I'm the only one, or maybe out of 10 people in Azerbaijan. So 99.99% support this war because they see it as a claim to get their territories back. When Azeri president was saying this war as he was saying, using a word, when the need will come, and people were making fun of this. And today they say that need is Mr. Pashinyan, because since Pashinyan came to power, Azerbaijan had a great hope for them, and he was very sympathetic with Azeris. First, he's a Democrat coming to power. Secondly, he's coming to win over Sarkisyan, which Azeris thought had a role in Khojaly massacre in 1992. Secondly, of Azeri people, where 600 people were killed. Secondly, they thought he was not doing well in negotiations with Azeri president. He was not compromising enough. So people were happy, and although there were rumors that there's some clashes at the border, Sarkisyan was saying, Sarkisyan's people, nothing happened. Border was quiet. So revolution took place. Pashinyan came to power, and people had hope for them. And I think in the beginning things were going well, but since that, Pashinyan has started all these provocations. well, you can say sending his son to Karabakh. There were claims that Armenians come and serve in Karabakh, but he's the first time proving that Armenian citizen comes to serve in Nagorno-Karabakh, which means there is no Nagorno-Karabakh, there is just Armenia. Secondly, he was saying Karabakh is Armenian. He came to Stepanakert to make that speech. And of course, as Azer was saying, if Karabakh is Armenian, what's the point of negotiation? His wife goes and takes a picture with a gun. He joins the women's battalion with a gun. So you see that there is some kind of provocation, or maybe some unknown things that they were thinking the war's coming. I don't know, but I just read the news, just came to me, the article by a prominent Armenian scholar and a part of government in '92, Gerard Liberidian, Professor Liberidian, who wrote on September 1st, 26 days before the conflict, before this war, that apparently Armenia, some people in Armenia government on August 10th has announced SERS Treaty as part of Armenian foreign policy, which means that SERS Treaty of 21, as you know, is basically taking Turkey into parts and dividing between France and Greece, etc. So Turkey saw this as a threat, and their foreign minister spoke 2 weeks later saying this is not good. So you see Pashinyan and his government, instead of moving things to peace, and apparently Azer president said that he was doing quite well with Sarkisyan. Apparently Sarkisyan wasn't as bad as people thought, because people don't hear much about the negotiations. But today, Azer president says actually Sarkisyan was very well. So you see that Pashinyan has done nothing to move things forward with the peace, but at least has done everything.
One of the things you are talking about is very, I think, concerning to me. You saying, well, politicians, war, soldiers, that's one thing, but you're saying majority of people, at least in Azerbaijan, are for, which means, at least the way I hear it, it means there was really no efforts or nothing serious about at least bringing some kind of dialogue between people, track to diplomacy, what we call.
And Pashinyan is making this, so it's bad in Azerbaijan, it's getting bad in Armenia. Pashinyan is not acting as a leader of a democratic state. He's acting as an authoritarian leader. I mean, Azeris cannot decide much. Even if we say stop the war, president or government may not stop the war. But in Armenia, there is a democracy, there's a democratic elected government. And he's telling his people, ordinary people, go and take weapons and fight for your lives. I've seen videos from people from Stepanakert or from other Armenian towns of Nagorno-Karabakh.
But that part
guys say,
Armenia is, at least from the reports I hear, Armenia is losing the war.
Yeah. But I think that fighting back is not help. If this is a existential threat for Armenians of Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh, this is not the way to stop it. Existential threat is to involve international mediators, surrender basically your army, but invite experts, invite observers so that if Armenian society is afraid of Azerbaijani army entering Nagorno-Karabakh and massacring people, which I hear from Armenian side, then that's not the way to stop it. That if Azerbaijan has, as this video suggests, more weapons, more soldiers, more spending on army, you may think it's going to win. Of course, there are international players, Russia and Turkey, now involved. We can talk about this when we come to a geopolitical side of this. But the main thing is that this war, this fight, is Azeri's fight, and they claim it, and it's Armenians' fight as well, because they don't want to agree with this situation. So, but what today seems to be interesting is that this Nagorno-Karabakh, which was 75% Armenian, 25% Azeri when the conflict started in 1988. We're about to talk about 40,000 Azeris from Nagorno-Karabakh, which was uprooted in the first place in 92 when Shusha town was occupied, and then other towns. And after Khojaly massacre, people just left in masses. And then there's 570,000 people from surrounding territories, which tells me a lot of those territories were actually occupied in a very brazen way. I mean, they didn't need it. And even in Kocharyan's memoirs, this is a second president of Armenia. He came to power in 97, and he to replace Terpetrosyan. He confesses in his book that Agdan, which had 150,000 Azeri people, was occupied by his own will. I mean, he decided with his team, with his cabinet in Karabakh, to go and occupy it. We of course don't know Russian side helped them or not. That's another story. I mean, definitely the military-wise. But Armenian President Levon Tepetesyan was unaware of it, and he asked him to immediately stop it and return Agdan. He did not agree. So a lot of this suffering comes from uprooting and killing. We lost 30,000 people in this war collectively with Armenia, but I think majority of them, about 20,000, are Azeris. And there's significant civilian population of it. So there are,
if I'm hearing you right, you're saying there is a lot of hurt. There's a lot of
yes, absolutely.
That is not caused by just what started in July and then
yes, it just
this
triggered.
is the continuation or the results of
exactly. But going back to 1920 and when we had first war, I mean, you have to understand that at that time things were much more civil. There were Azeri, because Armenia had significant Azeri population, Azerbaijan had significant Armenian population. So there were Azeri MPs in Armenian parliament in the First Republic, 1980, and there were Armenian MPs in Azeri parliament. And they were discussing, they were active people, and they were even nationalist party, Dashnak Sütun, which is Armenia's basically most nationalist party. They were sitting in Azeri parliament and they were talking about their rights. So things were much more civil in 1920 war. And of course, Azerbaijan and Armenia, it was missed opportunities the same way as it is today. And that's what a major threat is, because in 1920 of January, Entente powers sent a telegram to Azeris saying the major threat comes from Russia, from the north. It said the major threat comes from the north, because Azerbaijan was fighting with Armenia on the west. North is Russia. And it exactly happened 4 months after. April 28th, Russian forces entered from the north and took the control of Baku. And then when they went to Armenia in October, they captured Armenia. And that's what the territories mostly was decided. So there were 3 disputed territories, but Azerbaijan controlled them: Nakhchivan, Zangezur, and Armenia, Karabakh. As in 3 years under Bolsheviks, Nakhchivan became part of Azerbaijan with autonomy, with Turkey's insistence. Zangezur went to Armenia, and Karabakh became actually no one's. It was Azerbaijan, but it was Armenian autonomy. So it's actually like peace deal with Karabakh made in this way. So it was basically Armenian majority with inside Azerbaijan. So things were much more civil, and even in compromises when Armenia, and again, they were so smart in that time. All this, when Russian Empire was collapsing as a result of the First World War, these 3 countries, Georgians, Azeri, so 3 nationalities, because we didn't have countries yet. And Georgian, Azeri, and Armenian MPs of Russian Duma, Russian parliament, they came back to their countries because Russia was collapsing, civil war, World War First World War, and they established a Caucasus Union, the Transcaucasian Sejm, which that was to remain. That was the collective, like EU type country to be run. But because it was World War I, because Ottomans were there, because Germans were involved, Ottomans and Georgians had a dispute over territory again on Batumi. Ottoman controlled that territory and didn't want to give it to Georgia. So Georgia expected support from Azeris, and it didn't come. And they said, then we don't want to be in union with it. So the first thing collapsed. Georgia left on May 26th and announced its independence in 1918. In 28th of May, on the same day, both Armenia and Azerbaijan declared their independence. So they knew the thing, and capital that was Armenia wanted to make its capital as Gyumri, Alexandropol, their most Armenian city of that time. And because it was under Ottoman conquest, under Ottoman control, they said, ask Azeri MPs if we don't mind making Yerevan our capital, because Yerevan by that time was predominantly Azeri. There were Armenians, but they were predominantly Azeri. So Azerbaijanis said, yes, go ahead and do it. So there were compromises then. There were some kind of agreement that we have to live together. There were fights, but not as major uprooting as it is today, except Shusha was a big, the photo that this Al Jazeera video shows is from Shusha, and Shusha had a major problem. There were some uprootings, there were refugees, but not as catastrophic as it was in 88. And when this conflict started in 88, which is 20th of February 88, in Nagorno-Karabakh, start date is demonstrations in Nagorno-Karabakh, Armenians asking Soviet Azerbaijan and Soviet Armenia to approve transfer of Karabakh Autonomous Republic to Armenia Republic, Soviet Republic. So at that time, we're not talking about independence. We just wanted to be taken out of Azerbaijan and given to Armenia. And naturally, of course, Azerbaijanis refused because they have, claim or collective memory of Karabakh, and Shusha is being one of them. But there's a kingdom, a small monarchy in 18th and 19th century called Karabakh Khanate. So Azerbaijan associate Karabakh with that Khanate, and historically, with all those Turkic dynasties that ruled that Azerbaijan considered their own ancestors. The same way Armenians claim there were Armenian monarchies, small monarchs and states, vassal states in Karabakh. Yes, there were, but they were part of bigger states that Azeris consider their inheritance, and that's why naturally they don't want to agree. So this at that time in '88, this was led mostly by academics, Academy of Science, historians, philologists. They were all claiming for this because they had that collective or historical sources from 1918 conflict, and so they of course they put oil in the fire in this conflict, because people, I don't think majority of people, both Armenians and Azeris, wanted that or see that, but they listened to their most smart people, and those smart people said we have to do it this way.
Right.
And that's.
I got couple other quick questions as we'll have to move to Margarita. And one, the most maybe important is what can be done now. Or if you were to tell us, here's what really a good idea of how this conflict. You said you're against the war, so you don't think winning territory by war is how this should end. Then how should this end? What's a solution that would be, you think, acceptable for both Azeris and Armenians in this conflict? And what's the international role in making sure this kind of agreement does happen?
Well, once this fighting has to stop, of course, fighting will have to stop. And I don't think Armenian side wanting to fight more makes it even better. So I think to save Armenian lives, and Azeri lives, I think at least Armenia has to stop the war, stop fighting, invite mediators, come and monitor situation and do handover or do some kind of start peace talks. My suggestion I've come up with my own solution 15 years ago when I was doing my master's at University of Minnesota, and sent that to several, including foreign ministries of Armenia, Russia, that I think someone has a proposal. I've proposed, I haven't published it, but my suggestion has always been the territorial exchange is the best solution out of now, because Armenia doesn't agree to be inside Azerbaijan, even highest autonomy, and Azerbaijan doesn't want to give up a territory. So my suggestion has been to give for predominantly Armenian parts of Nagorno-Karabakh, autonomous oblast, except Shusha, to Armenia, and maybe even add Shaumian district, which was on the north, and it is also historic Armenian Melikdom that Armenians consider dear to them. Give it to them, to Armenia, with maybe corridor, without corridor. I think corridor is tricky because Azerbaijan and Armenia both agreed to some kind of territorial exchange in '99, and it went down because there were third parties not interested in this, supposedly Russia and Iran, because they don't want to lose Azerbaijan gain. So the Paul Gobel plan, which was made in late 80s, suggested giving a last small piece of land between Armenia and Azerbaijan and Nakhchivan to Azerbaijan in return to Nagorno-Karabakh. My suggestion was to give those Armenian territories to Armenia in exchange of former Azeri villages in Armenia that border Azerbaijan. So sum up the territories, and I have the map. I have made up a map by my own hand, and it looks maybe same as this now, maybe a little bit different, but it's going to solve the problem, because then Armenians remain in Karabakh. Armenians join finally, because this conflict started not with independence. Karabakh will not be independent for long, even if Azerbaijan accepted it. They will join Armenia. So basically it means a territorial gain for Armenia without territorial gain for Azerbaijan. So that's why their fight is about territorial gain. This is Caucasus. No one wants to lose its own property. So if we gain Azeri villages along of Armenia that were Azeri until 88, and some of them are still empty, Azerbaijan, I think, can give Azerbaijans will not mind giving Nagorno-Karabakh, except Shusha, to Armenia in exchange of the territory, because there are tons of Azeris from those Armenian villages that can want to go back home. So I think that's ideal solution.
But you're generally implying that one side will give up either their land or moving their people, or something that until today was not possible. And you talk a lot about bringing external mediators. Then is there no other way? I mean, you talked about earlier in the years that people were living together with no trouble.
Yes.
It's only about calling it Azerbaijan or calling it Armenia.
Yeah.
Is that the real? I mean, territory.
Mediators was to stop the current, for Armenia to get a guarantee that advancing Azeri army to get its territories. I mean, no one disagrees that this is Azeri territories, right? So even Armenian experts accept this is not disputed territory. That's why no one is helping Armenia. So to stop advancing Azeri army, if they're worried about their lives or whoever, because a lot of Armenians have left because of this shelling and mutual shelling. So there are not many citizens, but they want to come back. I'm sure this is their home. They want to naturally come back. They can return it, but by fighting, you're just making the situation worse. My suggestion, territorial exchange, yes, both countries will lose territories, but gain territories. So for my belief, territorial integrity is a numeric factor. It's not a design graphic. Maps may change, but if Azerbaijan at the end ends up 86,600 square kilometers, Armenia stays with 2,919,000 kilometers, but in a different shape, that's not a problem. That shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
And those villages, Azeri villages, ethnic Azeri villages, Azeris were expelled in 1988. Most of them are still empty. And Armenia doesn't have, people can, if there's some people there who leave, Armenians or refugees from Azerbaijan, Armenian refugees who have lived in those villages, they can remain or they can choose to stay with Azerbaijan. And I think bringing solution for this way will also unite them in the future, like into European type institution, or maybe join EU. And joining EU, there will be no borders. Then people can go and live wherever they want with the passports and etc., either with Trans-Caucasus passport or with EU passports. So I think by solving it this way can help us. That's my solution. I don't know about others.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And this is so similar to normally our discussions, Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which we do a lot because we're hearing from you, and Azeri, and now we're moving to hear Margarita. So we'll move you to the attendees side. Please stay with us. Margarita, this is, like we said in the beginning, this is a conflict that has a long history. You also watched the video. You looking at this conflict, where do you see the problems? Where do you see the context of the problem of this conflict?
Thank you for inviting me, and I think it's an important time, and as many discussions we have on this issue, as much awareness we can raise about what's happening in the region and how much there is human suffering on both sides, I think that might help to move things in a positive direction. I'm at least hopeful. Again, it's very difficult to talk about this conflict and in terms of like who is right and who is wrong. Obviously, Ulvi presented things that are resonating with the narrative that is in Azerbaijan. And I can obviously present a lot of other counter arguments that would resonate with Armenian perspective of how Armenians are the first Christian nation in the world. We have been there for many centuries. Yerevan is was built, and it's former city of Erebuni that is much older than Rome is, for that matter. So I mean, those are the things that it's going to go back and forth with no with any positive impact. I mean, how many arguments I will bring, I'm sure colleagues on the other side will find counter arguments. However, I think one thing that I would particularly want to respond to what Ulvi said about Pashinyan provoking or kind of taking the blame, I guess, in this escalation of the situation, and in particular the fact that he said that Ulvi mentioned that Pashinyan sent his son to Nagorno-Karabakh, to army. That's true. However, the narrative there is different. When Pashinyan did that, he segued his action with a speech that I'm putting my own son on the line, and I have stake in peace. I don't want my son to die. So that was the narrative, that my commitment to peace is by showing that I have my son there. I'm more than interested in peace. I don't want him to die. So that was the narrative, at least like what he said and why it was done. Obviously, we can see that it was interpreted very differently on the other side, which is again understandable in this context. So I kind of felt the need to respond to that to that particular incident. And what goes for Anna Hakopian, his wife, I think whatever came later, I think all the images that Ulvi is referring to, yes, but they happened after September 27th. So it's a very, once bullets are flying, the narrative changes. I mean, you know it as a conflict resolution specialist. I mean, things get really out of control at that point. What I want to say is that I think why we got here, I'm going to put aside all the historical arguments. I mean, I will not talk about any time back in history who did this first or last. Yes, the military victory of Armenia in 1994 was significant for Armenia. We do believe, or the Armenian nation believes, that it rightfully restored what was a historical injustice by Stalin. And again, historians, I'm sure there will be a lot of debate about it. However, what happened afterwards, I think, for the 30 years led us to this point. And by what happened, I mean like several factors. There is increased alienation of people on both sides. Ulvi mentioned that we had historical coexistence during the Soviet time, which is true pretty much. There have been, on an everyday level, things were working out okay. Yes, there were some demographic shifts here and there, which kind of accumulated into these grievances, but on everyday level, I don't think people were necessarily very unhappy. But there, after the war, things, there is a lot of alienation of people on the both sides. There is mutually exclusive narrative, and especially on the part of Azerbaijan. I think the enemy image that is portrayed about Armenians within the Azerbaijani community exacerbates and also feeds into the Armenian narratives of genocide. And obviously Turkey's involvement right now is not helping. I think one thing that is being, when we're talking about existential threat, I think a lot of people are completely discounting the fact of Turkey's involvement, the fact of Armenia's historical relationships with Turkey, the fact that Armenia is right now sees this as an existential threat. And there are some bits and pieces that are kind of ignored or not brought into this narrative. For example, when in 2006, the Armenian officer was killed in Budapest during the native language training and then released afterwards, extradited to Azerbaijan, and then was immediately released, just coming down of the from the airplane, awarded Azerbaijan's hero ranking, and all of that, that does not help Armenian people to believe that there can be a peaceful coexistence with the Azerbaijan, just because in the Armenian mind, like somebody who committed a horrific atrocity at a time of peace in a different country is being a hero in Azerbaijan. So that's, I think those are the small bits and pieces that are kind of left out from the puzzle, and we need to understand the entire puzzle. The second point that I want to bring is obviously the division, or the not division, the difference between the political systems that exist. Yes, Armenia went through challenging times for a long time. I think we were challenged by our own political system, but 2016, with the Velvet Revolution, I think that was the first time that there has been like such a wide, popularly supported political change, peaceful change in Armenia. And I think with that change, it solidified within the Armenian people the idea of we are creators of our future. We were able to transition to democracy. We were able to uphold democratic values, and we are ready for a solution. We're ready to solve things in a democratic way. I think, again, yes.
What is happening now? I mean, if you're coming from this narrative, a peaceful narrative, and you believe that you can create the change of tomorrow, why are you not able to, I don't know, bring the international role to, players to come in and mediate? Why are you not able to change this situation and not lead into war?
So, yeah, I mean, if you look, especially when you, your video also confirmed that when you're looking at the power, like military power balance in the region, there was no, given the current situation with the pandemic, there is no reason whatsoever for the Armenian side to start any offensive. If there were provocations, again, I'm not a military specialist, I can not speak to that, but I'm just looking at, as a conflict resolution specialist, and where the Armenian narrative stood before September 27th, I don't think there was any objective reason, or even in that case, subjective, for a full-blown escalation to be started on the Armenian side. With running the risk of being accused of being biased, I would say that I think all the known suggestions by international community to have monitors who will be looking and investigating who fired the shots first, to my knowledge, are turned down by the Azerbaijani side. Again, it goes into like where they're going to come from and all those debates. So that obviously prevents any preventive engagement or early engagement or any monitoring mechanism, effective monitoring, not like parachuting in and out. Because we had, like, when you have, like, for example, when you, for 30 years, we had OSCE monitors visiting the front line. It's an orchestrated, well-planned in advance. Obviously, people know where they're gonna arrive. Nobody shoots at that time, obviously. So there is no permanent monitoring mechanism in place that would allow to actually call the names. You started it first, you should do this, you should do that. So I think with lack of implementation and effective monitoring and the ability of the international community to actually name names and point fingers, makes this creates this environment of impunity. And I want to say on both sides, obviously, if, let's say, the Azerbaijani side knows that they're gonna shot over the contact line and not get reprimanded for that, they will do it. It goes back. I mean, Armenian side can show with some sort of restraint, but not always. There's no incentive. So I think there is, yes, we need to find peace through our own means, with our own society. But I think at this point, with all the international involvement, there should be a bigger stand, a stronger stand on the international community side to intervene to stop the immediate fighting, obviously. We can, again, like leave the discussion of the resolution to a later, I guess, like a secondary stage, but the immediate fighting is something that really needs to stop. You don't want to see kids. I mean, they're living in the, and no, people of Nagorno-Karabakh right now, people of Artsakh are the ones who are in the basement. There are people who had their lives built for 30 years and right now they're in basements, and I think they are that's one thing that needs to stop.
You know, I'm hearing you and I'm thinking this has happened in many conflicts in some ways. When we get to a good place where we have a ceasefire, which happened 26 years ago for you and Azerbaijan, for Armenia and Azerbaijan, and then kind of the international community falls asleep. And the assumption is a ceasefire or absence of, you know, overt violence means peace. And we know that's not true. And in some ways, that's what ended up happening with Armenia and Azerbaijan. Oh, everything is fine. They're not killing each other on a daily basis. They're likely not going to do it again. But what happens in 20, 30 years is you increase demonization, you increase violence. I see it on the Palestinian-Israeli side. People assume because now it's not a full-blown intifada, will always be fine, when it's not true. It's just preparing the ground for a worse situation.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to ask you, what can be done? In some ways, it's a similar question to ask to Ovi, and he suggested exchange of territory. What is the ideal solution, with or without the international community? What can be really done to settle this once and for all?
I think you're right, and I wanted kind of to continue. I honestly, I don't, as a conflict resolution specialist, as an Armenian, I want to say that I don't think exchange of land will resonate with the Armenian society, or that's even a solution. I do still think it's a band-aid, because it's not addressing the underlying grievances. It's not addressing the hatred underneath it. For Armenian, if you ask the Armenian society, it's not land for the sake of being square kilometer. There is so much emotional attachment and meaning assigned to its being a home, a homeland. And there is an Armenian word that we use, which is yerkid, which means also, it means the world, but also homeland. So if you think of that conceptualization, I don't think exchange of the lands would resonate even with the Azerbaijani side. I'm very skeptical about it. What I want to say, and I just saw there was a question, and I'm kind of wanted to address that if there has been attempt on the civil society to intervene, and that's exactly the problem with the increasing authoritarian regime in Azerbaijan, where civil society is under attack. There, in the past 10 years at least, like the first, in early 1990s, when we're all going through these processes of democratization, building of civil society, there was a lot of international effort, a lot of international support to attract to processes, to creating and building up civil society. However, with the misconstrued and misunderstood concept of civil society and what it means and how it can endanger in the minds of authorities that their power, there was a big crackdown on the civil society, especially on Azerbaijan, in Azerbaijan. And I think with lack of the lack of that engagement created a situation when polarizing narratives were brewing, kind of created or exacerbated the situation. There were several very marginal groups with very marginal effects that were meeting here and there, but there was no consistency. There were not, like in a conflict resolution, we have this concept of working with key people or working with more people. We were not working with either. It's not that we're working with wider public to spread awareness, but we're not working with key people that can kind of trickle down. was not happening. So we can talk as much as we want about exchanging the territory, about signing the ceasefire, and you name it. If there is no systemic way of addressing the hatred within the societies, and again, I will say this, and I am ready to take the accusation of being very biased, the hatred on the towards Armenian people in the Azerbaijani side, we can never achieve peace. For the full disclosure, I'm not saying Armenians are very much tolerant towards the Azeris. I'm not even saying that at the time of war it's not even possible. But when I'm trying to say that within, again, it's going to go to a larger discussion. But within the Armenian narrative, I think we are more traumatized and carry the load of the Armenian genocide with Turkey. That there is some sort of we view the conflict with Azerbaijan through the prism of genocide and existential threat coming from a country that has the motto of one nation, two states. That does not help, again, like the Armenian attitude towards Azerbaijan. And once we see policies that current policies, especially in the military field, that feed into that one nation, two state narrative, obviously people are scared, and it's seen as an existential threat to the existence of Armenian people outside of the Nagorno-Karabakh, even within Armenia.
Right, so we don't have to call it hatred maybe between the sides, but also fear is something that I'm sure is present, as you mentioned. Are there any peace building organizations or any organizations that are trying to connect the people? I mean, I know there's a lot of politics in this, but the local people, are they at all meeting and talking and trying to get closer?
I would say in recent years, very, very, very few. Most of the, and this is the issue. A lot of the peace building effort is not driven locally. And that's a significant issue. You have International Alert, you have Conciliation Resources doing wonderful things. I mean, when there is nothing else happening, those things are very important. You have Imagine Center for Conflict Transformation doing really important work. However, very few initiatives because of the disconnect between the societies. I mean, there is very difficult, for example, for an Azerbaijani peace building group to reach, first of all, to speak up in Azerbaijan, second of all, to reach out to the Armenian side. The second, on the other hand, like my dissertation actually was on this, on peace building process in the Caucasus, not particular in Armenia, but what I have, what I kind of gather from this, a lot of times, even the peace builders in Armenia who have very good relationship, very respect their Azeri colleagues extremely. They're like, we don't know how to act not to endanger like physically endanger them. So how to be supportive, but not fuel the existing mistrust towards these processes within Azerbaijan. And on the Armenian side, once the things get escalate, obviously the peace building voices get marginalized, obviously. Especially that it happened in 2016 with the escalation, when peace builders felt that they are under attack because people are dying on the front line. And obviously it's easy to be a peace builder during time of peace. It is extremely difficult to be a peace builder when you have people being killed on the front line.
We got a couple of questions, especially for you, Ovi, where people have questions about Azerbaijan and the freedom of press in Artsakh, and that there is no international press in those areas. Why is that? And then the second, we got quite a few questions for you, Ulvi, but we don't have much time, so we'll have you answer as much as you can in this. I guess
one of the question was, there's no international press in the front line? Well,
in Azerbaijan,
Okay.
that international press is not getting as much or not getting access. And then about
okay. Yeah, there were.
tweeting very inflammatory language. Let's just those.
Well, I'm not sure if I kind of understood. I mean, but yeah, there were some, claims that Azerbaijan was not, and that's unfortunate, not allowing international media to the country as early as, for example, Armenia did, and allowed them to Nagorno-Karabakh. So, but I think that issue has been has ended. There are a lot of already France 24 and other channels in Azerbaijan reporting in the front line. I don't know much details. I heard the France 24 journalist complaining that she's being followed and etc. But I think that I'll just comment on democracy, and unfortunately, I mean, I worked for many international organizations for democratization. First as a humanitarian assistance to refugees and IDPs, but then democratization processes. All we have done, of course, has not been ended fruitfully. I mean, same was in Armenia. I mean, of course, Armenia and Georgia has done more progress in that compared to Azerbaijan. But I think the solution of that issue will come when, unfortunately, Azerbaijan has lost war, has lost territories. The people, as I said, are angry. And for them, for years, Karabakh has been issue number one, not democratization. It came second. So I think once we solve that problem of Nagorno-Karabakh, and I agree that we have to solve it mutually agree. I mean, if we win now completely, it doesn't mean Armenian, as I've said to my own people, and that's why I'm not liked by my Facebook friends or by anyone who listens to me, that if we win, it doesn't mean Armenia will stay silent. This conflict will come back in 20, 30 years. So that's why I'm saying the solution is to go into a territorial exchange. And that has been on the table, and sides were close to signing agreement on that. My solution is even better than corridor solution. If Azerbaijanis can go back to Shusha, I'm fine. They'll close their eyes for 4 Armenian or 5 Armenian districts, including Shaumian, to go to Armenia, as long as they gain territories from Zangezur and Goicha that they've been whining all these years. We are from Zangezur, we are from Sisyan, which are Armenian. We can't go there. So, of course, when we say this, Armenians always come back saying, oh, what about Baku? We need to go back to Baku. Okay. Yes, I think eventually Azeris will go to Yerevan and Armenians will come to Ganja, Baku. But that has happened in more different way. As I said, sides have to consult, So, I mean, again, commenting on what Margarita said about Safarov, I disagreed with that. It's a shameful, in my view. I mean, whatever government does, that's different. I don't judge, but people supporting Safarov's heroization are not good for me. And I've been supporting Akram Aylisli, the writer who came out and published that novel, Stone Dreams. I've been promoting Akram Aylisli. I've been writing articles about Akram Aylisli. I've known him for family, as a part of his family for 30 years. So that's a different story. But I am for sympathy for Armenian side. I'm for empathy for Armenian side. I think more we see people with empathy in Armenia towards Azerbaijan will approach to peace more, closer, faster way. Because currently, wherever I haven't seen much empathy from Armenian side on Azeri losses, on 570,000. I was sad to see Armenians of Stepanakert leaving because of the shell. And I reminded myself, this was the same what Armenians did.
Ulvi, I think, sorry,
yes.
and I'm going to stop you because of the time pressure, but definitely
and it's talking about empathy and sympathy toward each other. I mean, I think there's a lot of fear and anger and hatred going on, and what a better way to end is that we need more empathy, we need more understanding, we need to connect with each other much more.
And in a positive way, finding things that humanizes each other. Dehumanization has been such a big part of the narrative that I think we need to find a way of humanizing each other and connecting with each other's suffering in a way that makes us part of the human family. I don't think we're seeing each other as a part of the same human family.
Right. And it's important to say, I look at both of you, and I've talked to both of you before this show, and you're not, you're Azeri, you're Armenian, but you're not, I'm pretty sure neither of you see the other as the enemy. You don't see Olvi as your enemy, and Olvi, no, you don't see Margarita as your enemy. And I think we, in so many conflicts around the world, this demonization of the other is really the best weapon to keep politicians able to get us to be willing to carry weapons and shoot at each other, being willing to die for eventually for their own causes and for the causes of those who sell them weapons and for the causes of those who benefit financially from it, and leaders who can justify their dictatorship because of it, and so on, so on. And that's not only Armenia, not only Azerbaijan. Unfortunately, that's too many places in the world right now. But thank you both for joining us. I think everyone to today's show will leave with a lot more understanding of what's happening there. And regardless if you're more sympathetic toward this side or that side, I think we need to be sympathetic to the other side that we didn't know. And I know from my friends, some are sympathetic to the Armenians more, some are sympathetic to the others, Azerbaijanians more. And I think it's important that we careful at least to understand what the other side thinks, and to realize there's a human being there as well, even if we politically are supportive of one or the other cause. Kim?
Thank you.
Well said, Aziz.
Well, next it's going to continue similar, right?
Yes.
Again, I'm all for looking back to 1918 as a role model. Those leaders dealt with it better way than we're doing it now. So that's one thing. I mean, that example from Yerevan was a good example to show how Armenian MPs felt a need to ask. Yes, Yerevan might be Armenian for centuries back, but in 1918 it was predominantly Azeris, and they felt a need to ask. So that's a kind gesture, and we need to do that more. We need to understand that we're not threats to that. I mean, we're neighbors. We have to live here. We're not moving away.
Amen.
Right?
Well, next week we're going to talk about doing that here in the United States, and we're talking about how do you have a conversation with your friends, people who you know, your neighbors, who might have different political opinions, especially in those times, and how do we stop demonization of our own neighbors? And I'm not talking about you can be a Republican, you can be a Democrat. I'm not saying you need to switch your party, but how do we not start hating each other and leading ourselves into a civil war because of it? It's going to be an interesting, fun conversation. So join us next week, and I'm hoping one day, hopefully sooner than later, we can do our own dual narrative trips in Armenia and Azerbaijan, and have Olvi and Margarita join us and be able to talk about it and be able to safely travel between the two different sides, because it's not where we travel, it's how.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.